Welcome to the Creative Force Podcast, a podcast all about empowering you to live in your God-given identity and go after the dreams in your heart. I'm your host, Sharon Stark, and every week we'll be having powerful conversations that will combine practical and biblical wisdom for living your purpose. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of the Creative Force Podcast. I am so excited that we are already on the second season. That is 20 episodes that have already been recorded, and it has honestly flown by so fast. In the first season, we talked about overcoming limiting beliefs, stepping out of your comfort zone, living in your God-given identity, and so much more. And if you haven't already listened to the first season, I do encourage you to go back and listen to those episodes. There is so much wisdom that was shared from some amazing women, and I'm so excited for you to hear from the amazing women that are going to be on this season. This podcast, I started it because I have a passion to encourage others to boldly go after the dreams that God has placed in their heart. And I believe that during this current season, God is drawing people into deeper intimacy with himself so that he can then position them into the right places that will change generations. We can see this in the Bible with Joseph. He was put into a position that allowed him to save his family from famine and be a blessing to all of Israel. And God, all he needs is our agreement. And in this first episode of Season 2, I want to share a story in the Bible that God has really used to speak to me about taking action in my own life. And it comes from 2 Kings 7. The story is about Israel, and they are under siege from the Syrians. So everyone in the city is starving. And I'm going to start reading it at 2 Kings 7:3, and this is New King James Version. Now there were 4 leprous men at the entrance of the gate. And they said to one another, "Why are we sitting here until we die? If we say we will enter the city, the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. And if we sit here, we will die also. Now therefore, come, let us surrender to the army of the Syrians. If they keep us alive, we shall live, and if they kill us, we shall only die." So we see here 4 men, they're lepers, they're sitting at the entrance of the gate because they wouldn't have been allowed into the city because of their condition. And they ask themselves this really powerful question. They say, why are we sitting here until we die? They have this kind of like aha moment. And I remember reading this passage one day, and this scripture, it literally just jumped off the page to me. These lepers, they came to a realization that their inaction, or you could say their passivity, it wasn't helping them. So we can also contrast this with the Israelites in the Bible, and they kind of had an opposite attitude. So God, he had given them the promised land, and it was flowing with milk and honey. But instead of stepping forward into that promise, they actually wanted to return to their past. So this is from Numbers 14:2-3. And all of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?" And we have 2 different attitudes here. One that's like, let's do something about this. Let's embrace change. And one that is like, no, I don't want anything to change. And there's a quote by Tony Robbins, and it says, "Change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change." And I wish that this was not always the case, but it has been a lot of times. I can even say in my own life. And it happens when we feel a prompting in our heart from God we step out, do something, and it's scary. So we ignore that prompting. And usually we don't take action until it becomes too painful to stay in that same place. And in my own life, I've realized that a lot of times that feeling of being stuck, it just happens as a result of not taking action on something that I know that God has already spoken to me to do. So on the other side of our action is resources and provision. And the lepers in 2 Kings, they decide that they're going to do something. And the next thing that happens is really amazing. And I think it's a demonstration of what happens in the spiritual realm when we put action to our faith. It says, "And they rose at twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians. And when they had come to the outskirts of the Syrian camp, to their surprise, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the army of the Syrians to hear the noise of chariots and the noise of horses and the noise of a great army. So when these lepers moved, God moved too, and he made it sound like a great army was approaching the Syrian camp. They took a step of faith, and God was right there beside them. He was working on their behalf. And that day, all of Israel was delivered because these 4 lepers decided to do something. So I want to ask you, what is waiting for you on the other side of your action? Whose life will be changed because you decide to step out in faith? So that is the purpose of this podcast. It is to encourage you and cheer you on as you boldly go after the dreams that God has placed in your heart for a reason, and to provide you with the tools to help you do that. So if you are ready to step out of your comfort zone, leave fear behind, and embark on a journey of purpose and fulfillment, then you're in the right place. Get ready to be inspired, encouraged, and equipped to live as the creative force that God has already designed you to be. Welcome to Season 2 of the Creative Force Podcast. Hey friends, if you've been enjoying this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you wrote a review. If you're listening from Apple Podcasts, you can scroll down to Ratings and Review and click on Write a Review to leave one. So many of you have shared kind words with me, and it would mean so much to me if others could see them. Also, if you feel like this podcast could bless someone you know, please share it with them. Thank you so much. The show notes for today's episode are available on my blog at yourcreativeforce.com, as well as other resources and inspiration to go after your dreams.